What if the solution to growing your business was about systems? Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Probert.
Hey, I'm Jonathan's co-host, Laura DeFranco. Welcome to Systemized.
We're here to talk to successful entrepreneurs about what helped them grow their business. It's what we wanted to know when we started ours, and it's what's going to help you build yours. And today, we're excited to welcome the head world builder of Curiosity Island, Brendan Fong, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Really grateful to be here.
Thank you for coming on. Let me tell you guys a little bit about Brandon first. Brandon is a husband to his high school sweetheart, Leia, father to a curious little girl, Kaya, host of the Top 1% Beyond Curious podcast, founder of Curiosity Island, and creator of Find Your Four, a framework that helps you live in the magical zone where your greatest impact meets your greatest joy. What is Curiosity Island? One Castaway, which is the loving nickname for members, described it as Professor X gathering world changers to solve big problems in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. This explains everything and nothing, so feel free to send a carrier pigeon to Curiosity Island for further questions.
We have a special department for that.
Yes, you win the award for bios. All right. And I'm a castaway, so I get to laugh about it because I love that. But I just want to shout you out for a minute, Brandon, because coming into your world has been a game changer for me. And I think if I summed it up, I would say that the people you attract are some of my friends now. And that is saying something huge, really, because we all talk about networking and building relationships. But when people care enough to create friendships out of those networking relationships, life just moves to another level. And I thank you so much, like, for who you are and for doing that for us and on Curiosity Island. It's been quite a ride.
Oh man, Laura, that means the world to me because yesterday, we launched this economy, like a Curiosity Island economy, and Max, our partner that helped create this, she asked us to list the top 5 professional accomplishments, and that was the number one thing I listed is what you just shared with me there, Laura. Because like above all the professional stuff that I've done, when somebody tells me that I've helped engineer a world for people to develop true, lifelong, deep friendships that obviously have business ramifications as well, I think that that's the secret sauce is when you like deeply love and trust and are soul connecting and making business happen together. I think that's the most magical thing. So so grateful for you being a castaway, Laura, and excited to dive into all the different things that have maybe made the secret sauce behind the Willy Wonka chocolate factory.
Awesome. Well, getting right into it, we touched a little bit about it in your bio, but can you share with us the system that you want to share with the rest of the entrepreneurs today?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that has been the underpinning of the entire Curiosity Island world that is simultaneously the thing that has helped me the most in my business is this concept called the Find Your Four framework. So you could tell me what you want to start with, but I could start with just a basic level explanation if you feel like that would be the best entry point.
Let's go with that first, and I'll follow it up afterward.
Cool. So, well, I guess I'll ask you, Jonathan. Obviously, Laura's very intimately familiar with this, but I'm sure many of our listeners as well. So the Find Your Four framework is based on the 80-20 principle or the Pareto rule. So I always like to I'll ask you, Jonathan, on a scale of 1 to 10, how familiar are you with like 80-20 and that kind of thing? Because that helps me to kind of...
From what I understand, is it the 20% of your actions give 80% of the outcome? Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, perfect. And I think like many people kind of hear it talked about generally, and that's kind of like the surface level that most people understand. So it's this beautiful lens that you can use inside of your business. It's like, what are the 80% of 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your clients. So like, how do you identify, just as a rule of thumb, how do you find those 20% of clients? Or 80% of the problems also come from 20% of your clients. So how do you find the maybe the problem child and figure out a loving way to engineer systems that would make them not show up in your business or cause as many issues? So at a surface level, right then and there, it's like, okay, that's fantastic. And it changed my life when I started looking at it that way. But what really transformed me is when I found out that 80-20 was fractal. So you can do the 80-20 of the 80-20. And what you find out when you do that a second time, that there's 4% that yields 64. So 4% of your actions yields 64% of your results. So it's like that to me, when I first heard that, I was like, selfishly, like, what would that be for me? Like, how do I find my 4? That sounds really wild and interesting because so the deeper that I've gone into this, it really mirrors this quote that has transformed my life by Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life and you will call it fate. And for the longest time, when I heard that quote, I only thought about it from the negative perspective. Like, what are the negative limiting beliefs that I might have? How do I increase my awareness of them and figure out how I make them not have as big of an impact on me? But I realized the same thing applies to this 80-20 of the 80-20, this 4%, is that there are certain things that are so natural to the way that we operate. They're unconscious, yet they are responsible for the majority of our results. And the wild thing about your 4% is that because it's unconscious, it's so hard for people to be able to articulate, explain, because it's like, how do you think? What do you mean, how do I think? Like, how do you breathe? I don't know. I don't know how to explain how I breathe. So it's this really weird thing because it is simultaneously at the core of what you do, but it is also, you're not able to explain it. But the more you're able to externalize it and the more that you're able to develop a relationship with it, at least for me, I'm now able to understand how to engineer my business around the thing that I'm able to create that gives me the biggest impact when I stay inside of it. And the most magical part about the 4% that I found is that it is a infinitely renewable resource when you're looking at it from an energy perspective, because your 4% gives you energy when you give it away. So it is like, unlike anything else where it's like you feel depleted when you give it, it is this crazy thing where you get energy when you give it away, and it creates exponential results. So the more within our teams, the more within our communities, we can support each other in, one, increasing awareness of our 4%, but then two, developing systems and processes and teamwork of allowing people to stick inside of that 4%. That's what I found the real magic to be. So I can go into how someone might find their 4%, some of the things that we've done on Curiosity Island for it, but that's kind of the flyby of the Find Your 4 concept.
No, that's great. It's definitely the giving you energy part is a great touch there. It's the doing what you're good at will give you energy while giving you results, which is definitely a good thing to actually figure out what you're good at there. 100%. So let's dive into that actually and actually try to help people find their 4%.
Yeah, 100%. So I will say too, another way that I'm applying this, and I didn't even think about saying this until just now, but so because this is this rule of thumb that applies all over the place. On my podcast, I've done 270 episodes now. So I'm undertaking this ridiculous project. It is like, I'm kind of slapping myself because I'm frustrated at how big of a project it is, but I'm excited for it. But I'm challenging myself to find the 4% of the content that has yielded the majority of the results buried inside of 270 freaking episodes. So it's like, it is. So all this to say is I will share everything. I love sharing absolutely everything. And if you want like I'm happy to give away all the resources because I have a custom GPT that I use for this. I have a whole workbook that uses this. So I can talk about that later about where, if people wanted to follow along with this, how they can go about doing that. But I will also walk people through the real-time thing, because the biggest tool that I have found to use this is a custom GPT I've built. Eventually my goal is to build this into a software, but I can walk you through, Jonathan, a real-time example of finding your 4%. And then if somebody wants to follow along, they can also grab the resources as well. I don't remember exactly. Did you want me to walk you through like how somebody else can find this?
You got to help Jonathan find his 4%. I think that would be this super awesome walkthrough, because I've done this process with Brandon. So Brandon is a genius, first of all, and the way that he has worked this system has been absolutely profound and powerful for pretty much every castaway on that island with you, Brandon. And I will say to you that it was challenging for me. And I think it's been challenging for people, but it's also such a wonderful wake up call, because you know how you said it earlier, like you just breathe, like you don't have to figure out how to do it. There's an unconscious things going on. Well, if you're operating like that and you can never see that, how the heck are you going to know what this is? And Brandon has figured out a way to figure it out, which is awesome. So I think you should take Jonathan through as much as you feel like.
Yeah, let's do it. And Laura, thank you for sharing that, because I remember when you went through citizenship, you were the person that, and this is why I love you about you, Laura, is because you're so willing to just throw your hand up and be like, I don't get this. Like please help me understand, because it is so hard. It is so hard because it's like, you can't see it in yourself, and it takes almost like beating it, like people being like, wait, just so you know, I don't see what you see, but you're clearly doing something here. That like, so if at first pass, this is like, something that it's designed to be difficult, not designed to be difficult, but it is a process that requires lots of self-awareness and a lot of other people mirroring it back. So thank you for sharing that, Laura. So here's what I'll do. on my other monitor right now, I have ChatGPT pulled up. I have this Find Your 4 GPT, and it's got this programming of identifying, taking a story that someone shares, analyzing that story, and giving a rough draft of your 4%. I always think it's really important to talk about your 4% as a rough draft, because so many personality tests that we take, it's like a snapshot in time. And like all these studies have actually debunked that these personality tests that make you feel super good, it's like they actually don't, many of them don't actually support you in many different ways. So your Find Your 4 is designed to evolve as you evolve. It's designed to constantly, as you increase more awareness of how you operate, you can get more and more nuances. So I'm constantly uncovering more different ways of approaching it. But within one question that I will walk Jonathan through, you can at least get a rough draft of this thing. And the more stories that you share with this GPT, the more different diversity that you'll experience. So obviously within one question, it's only going to pull it from the one frame of that question. But the more sides of yourself that you show, sometimes even like from childhood, like who have you always been? What are the ways that you played with toys? This will all make sense in the second one I described this with Jonathan. So I'm going to stop giving examples and just ask you the question, Jonathan. So what I would love for you to do is I would love for you to think of a time when you created a meaningful result in your life. The key word there is meaningful. So it could be personal, it could be professional, it could be from a sport that you could play, whatever it is, as long as it was inherently meaningful for you. So you accomplished something meaningful. And the other part to this question is, while you pursued that, pulling that off, the journey of making it happen was also meaningful. So as you look back at like all that you had to do to pull this thing off, it was also meaningful. So Jonathan, I know you're partnered with your mom here that's got all these different things. So you probably got a bajillion different stories that fit that. But is there one that shows up right now that feels like it fits those criteria?
I would say probably, not to get a little like sad with it, but trying to take back control of my mental health.
Hmm.
I know my mom probably knows what I'm going to go with here, but doing basically going and doing things on my like that I wanted to do, just to like take some, I guess, control back. And so I have two options here. One was getting my first tattoo, which was, I think, probably 2 years ago now. And the second would be learning to ride a motorcycle and getting my motorcycle license.
Those are both really good ones, and I know Laura has a really cool tattoo that's like the feather. So, how about Laura? You pick.
I should pick one of the ones he was
Pick
going for.
the motorcycle story or the tattoo story?
Oh
Which
my
one do you
gosh.
think would be
Okay,
more
I'm a
fruitful?
mom. I'm just going to go for the tattoo. It's a little less dangerous, so we'll go there.
Okay, tattoo it is. Just 1 second though, because I'm going to make sure that the GPT is ready to go, because I had it transcribing. And okay, so yeah, whenever you're ready, Jonathan, would love for you to share the tattoo story.
Sure. I'm not totally sure when it was that I decided that I wanted it, but once I knew, I was like, I want to get a tattoo, you know? My first like thought of that is like, oh, I got kind of have to know what I want and find an artist around my area that'll actually go and create my image. So I did some digging, and I was just researching common tattoo designs, and I came across it's called the Ouroboros, which it's been used a lot in a whole bunch of different media. There's like, it's even in like Disney's Loki, the one scientist guy, if you watch that show. But essentially it's the snake eating its own tail. And it's supposed to like represent like ever-going change and bettering yourself, as in just the snake eating its own tail on repeat forever, infinite change, all that kind of stuff. So once I settled on that, I went through like things like Pinterest. I went through like Google Images, all that kind of stuff, to find a few reference pictures on what I wanted. And I came across a few images of a live snake and a snake made out of bone, both eating each other's tails, which I'll take off my jacket and show the tattoo at the end here. But I did that, and then I found once I found the few reference images, I found a couple, uh, one shape that I liked and one style that I liked. But from there, if you ever gotten tattoos, you kind of have to go and make sure your artist does that style, because there's a whole bunch of tattoo styles all over the place. Realism, neo-traditional, traditional, all that kind of stuff. But once I found the one that that kind of matched the one style from the picture I went, I just I found a few of them at first. A lot of tattoo artists are very busy, and so the one you don't usually get the one you want. So I messaged the person I wanted first. They weren't available, and so I went and messaged a few more over a couple months, and eventually, on some sort of, I don't know, fate or just by chance, the original person that I wanted opened their books like right as I went to go look again. So immediately I was like, okay, doing it right now, going in and signing on to their calendar, and they accepted it, and I was booked for about a week before, I think it was my 23rd birthday, just by chance. So happy birthday to myself by whatever happening. And yep, scheduled it, got there, wasn't really nervous. They sat down with me, showed me the design. It took about 3 hours to complete. If you're getting a tattoo, your forearm's probably the best place to do it, for your
You
first
did it on
one.
your ankle?
Yeah, ankle would be probably horrible, but forearm's great. It's not too bad for the pain. All tattoos definitely hurt, but it's definitely not the worst area on your forearm. But this is the first tattoo I got. You can see the bone snake and the regular snake.
And what made you choose to put it in an infinity symbol for those that are listening and didn't get that clip right there? But you chose, because the Ouroboros is traditionally a circle, right? Like, and so what made you choose to do it as an infinity symbol?
I mean, infinity is kind of a similar meaning there, just like continuous, continuous, it's the number for continuous growth in math, but it kind of goes with the Ouroboros theme of continuing growth and change and all that kind of stuff. And with my design and the two snakes, it was they just kind of went well together for what I wanted.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that story. And it was a perfect example. And I love that you chose that story because, traditionally when we think about a system or a structure, like people think that it needs to be oriented around some kind of business thing or something like that. So I love that the example that you chose was completely not in that realm. And I found that the biggest insights that I've gotten on my 4% come from sharing that kind of thing, because it reveals a part of you that is maybe not traditionally surfaced in other areas. Because the special thing I found about your 4% is that you operate this way as a default no matter where you're operating, right? So it's like, it could be business, it could be professional, it could be other ways. Like if I'm going to play a board game, I'm going to approach playing the board game leveraging my 4% in the same way that I would play it, other ways. So thank you so much for sharing that specific example that is from a realm that people will be like, and the key word there is meaningful. That's the biggest thing. So thank you for sharing that. And also for anyone that happens to grab the GPT and is doing that, the link that you shared of that story, the details, if you share like a 30-second story, like we're obviously not going to be able to get that much information from it. So anyways, I ran the GPT on the back end. And so I'm going to share my screen in just a second and I'll reveal what it pulled from that. But before I do that, I want to explain the 3 different levels that the GPT is looking for, because it's a fractal. Basically, I have a Russian nesting doll on my background here that I never know is going to be there because sometimes my daughter steals it. But like, so the way it works is that each layer lives inside of the other layer. So we talked about the 80-20 as the first layer, so the 20%. If you do the 80-20 of the 80-20, you go inside, you find the 4% that's inside of it. So technically, the 4% is an expression of the 4% looked at from a slightly different lens, and then you do an 80-20 of the 4%, and there's still one more layer that we look at, the 80-20 of the 4, where it's 0.8. 0.8% of your actions still yields 51.2% of your results. Now, when I found that for the first time, that blew my mind even more than the 4%, because it's like, what could be underneath 1% of what I do that is still responsible for this. So what I'll describe the 20, the 4, and the 0.8, the way that I've looked at them and the way that it makes sense to me is that I'll start with the bottom and go up. Your 0.8% represents your core identity and belief system. So it's like there's no such thing as an action that we take that doesn't have an associated underlying belief inside of it. So the more we're aware of our core beliefs, of our identity, the more that it actually upstream impacts the actions that we take, which is the 4%. So the 4% is the layer that I look at of like, what are you actually doing? Like, what are you physically doing? And then one more layer up is the 20%, which I define as your ideal environment. So what are the environmental conditions that must be there for you to feel fully able to express yourself inside of your 4%? Because we've all been in different scenarios at school and business or wherever where we've not felt safe or not felt in the right environment to be able to fully express. So they all kind of are greater expressions of each other, and they all kind of fit inside of each other. And the really cool thing is like you can play with making adjustments on each of the layers, because for example, if I decided to intentionally choose to embody a new 0.8% of belief, that's going to actually have an impact on how my 4% shows up. Because if I inherently believe something about myself that I'm not a confident person, my 4% is not actually going to shine as brightly if I'm kind of displaying those beliefs that are underneath there. So it's really I'll walk you through this. The last thing I'll say is that the beauty of Find Your 4 is that it is, for those that study like energetics and this kind of stuff, it's a very masculine structure, right? Like it's effectiveness, it's 4% yield 64, but like on the inside of this, it's pure feminine energy. It's how do you move? How do you organically understand these things? And the duality of that is what I think makes this so beautifully, is because it's based on what makes you more effective, but it's truly an internal process. So all that to say is, Jonathan, I'm going to share my screen and I'll share with you what it came with on your additional layers here. And then you can tell me how they shape up. And what I would also love, Jonathan, too, if it doesn't resonate with you, please tell me, right? Like, so like, because I think it's very telling to people that might experience this. I don't want this to be all flowers if you don't feel like it resonates with you, because, you know, maybe there's somebody that has the same exact situation. So for your 20%, your ideal environment, it put spaces of sovereign becoming. And then it put 4 different bullet points of the environmental conditions that would support you in your 4% of coming through. So it said intentional self-expression. You thrive in environments that allow you to make deliberate, visible declarations of who you are becoming, especially when that expression fuses meaning, symbolism, and aesthetic. Autonomy in the unknown. You're energized by spaces where you can research, explore, and make decisions on your own terms. The unknown doesn't paralyze you, it sharpens your sense of direction. Ritualized growth. You flourish in experiences that mark internal transformation through external ritual. You don't just change, you consecrate your change. And then alignment between inner and outer worlds. You feel most alive when your internal journey is made visible, when symbols like the Ouroboros reflect and reinforce your evolving beliefs and identity. So, Jonathan, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like you're talking about a different human being, to 10 being like you're inside my mind, where do we fall on the scale so far?
I would say 7 or an 8.
Okay.
My
Beautiful.
mom can probably.
Yeah, yeah, this is cool, Brandon. And it's so cool to have, I mean, I'm sitting here as his mom being able to listen to you say these things too. Like, this is kind of cool on other levels in terms of what I know about him, or maybe what I don't know about him as a young adult, you know? So this is so cool.
Thank you. And again, the more stories you share from different dimensions of your life, the more kind of robust it's going to get. Because like I'll say one thing here. This is actually where we started in the conversation, Laura, because you talked about the relationships that have been built within Curiosity Island. That was the number one condition that changed everything for me in my ideal environment, is when I got clear on who were the people I wanted to surround myself with. So I think like universally, that's a great exploration for anyone. And the number one key for me to figure that out, and I think this would be helpful for anyone, where it's like, whether it's your strategic partners or your employees or what, like what are the characteristics of the people that belong in that environment that'll help you support and thrive. For me, the unlock from this is a slight tangent, but I think it's worth it. Laura and I also have mutual friends. Actually, I think Randy Molland, you introduced me to Randy Molland. Randy introduced me to this concept called +2. So basically, at the end of every conversation you have, you rate your energy level on a scale of -2 to +2. And so what I did is after all my interactions, I looked at my +2 humans and I said, what are the commonalities behind all of my +2 humans? And I realized that it fell into an acronym. And on Curiosity Island, we call each other castaways. So CAST is actually an acronym that was reverse engineered from the people that gave me +2 energy. So it stands for curiosity, people that are ridiculously curious about themselves, about the world. A stands for alignment. They're people that are committed to living a life in alignment with their natural strengths and abilities. It's not enough to just build a business that makes money. It's got to be something that is an expression of themselves. S is for spiritual, people that are willing to have deep spiritual transformational conversations. And I just use the T accidentally. T is for transformational, people that are, committed to not just being super transactional in the way they approach, but they're exponential. So those, to me, when I did a deep dive on +2 energy people, I'm like, how do I define that? I came up with a term called castaway, and like that is now a core element of what helps my 20% to thrive, and protecting that and making sure that the right people are inside of there. So that was a huge side tangent, but I'll pause there for a second if there's any things that you guys wanted to jam on that spot before I go on to the other pieces.
Got anything, Jonathan?
No, I mean, I've heard of, I think, the +2 from the Chris Wilkinson, our business coach, who's also friends with Randy. So I'm
Nice.
sure they've talked about it before.
there's a circle that where we learned that. And so Brandon, like, you're making me, I love your CAST. I would use the same, but I guess my question is, if I figure it out for myself, that's the key.
100%.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, no, the goal with everything that I share is for you to not take my answers. Please don't take my answers. It is for you to come up with your own answers. I think society has gotten really good at showing us that this is where you are and this is where you want to be, and like my thing that's $20,000 or $15,000 will teach you how to fill that gap. And I think that it's better to learn how to uncover your own answers. So absolutely, yeah, maybe you resonate with some of Cast and Castaway. Borrow it, great, but like make sure it's true for you, not that because it worked for me. So 100%.
Yep, love it.
Cool. Well, then I'll go to the 4% layer. So 4%, again, your actions and qualities, and it gave an overarching title of Deliberate Architect of Self. And it gave, again, 4 bullet points underneath this. So the first was symbolic precision. You're gifted at discovering powerful symbols that mirror your journey. You don't just choose arbitrarily. You choose with depth and intention, ensuring that your choices mean something lasting. So I'll just slow down here for a second here, because if I looked at that, and if that's accurate, it may not be accurate. I would assume, Jonathan, that the way that you chose to brand your company and the symbols that you chose to create inside of your branding, there is a level of intention that you have that applies to the way that you pursue the aesthetic and the way that you design your business, right? So I see you nodding your head. That awareness, look at where we got that awareness from, was from you thinking about your tattoos, right? Like, so it's just cool that's where that starts to transcend, is when you can understand the commonality behind them. Patience and pursuit. You exhibit a rare steadiness and resolve. You'll wait for the right moment or person, like your original tattoo artist, even if it takes months. You understand that timing amplifies meaning. Thoughtful aesthetic curation. You instinctively bridge art and identity. You don't just find what's beautiful, you find what's true and then shape it into a form that feels like you. And quiet reclamation of power. You have a powerful ability to gently take control without fanfare, but with fierce clarity. When things feel out of balance, you return to the grounded self, leadership through meaningful acts. So I have a few more thoughts on this, but I'll pause and throw it back to you for a second, Jonathan, about how that level lands with you.
I think probably about the same
Cool.
as the last one. Yeah.
Beautiful. Because so
that's pretty good for like one short story, like to get 7 or an 8 out of that. So that, I think, it says to me that story was a good pick for him to share. It had meaning to it, which is allowing this to work at a deeper level. Yeah.
And I would say too, again, I'm not asking everyone that tries this to go share an art story about your tattoo. I could say this about any story that was shared, but look at what it's pulling up, is you instinctively bridge art and identity. I would assume, Jonathan, that systems for you are also a part of your art expression, right? Like, systems isn't just like something that's fun to do. Like, it's kind of how you learn how to express and bring shape and form to what you're creating. And so again, I always want to just be careful with this, because ChatGPT is really good at making us feel good about ourselves. And some people say that about the GPT. It's like, wow, that feels so flowery and magical. And yes, sure. But what I found out about this is that it at least gives you language to start to like crystallize some of this stuff. And the real magic is when you look at the 4% and you say, how does that actually work? Because even if let's say of all these 4 things, I'm just making this up, Jonathan, but let's say thoughtful aesthetic curation resonates with you most deeply. The real magic is, how does that actually work for you? Like if you were to try to break down your process for curating and bridging and building systems and making sure that is in alignment, that's the part that's like the unconscious part. But now at least I brought it to your awareness. Where you're like, I didn't really think that was a thing that I was doing. But if I were to explore that, if I were to figure out what that's like, how might you take that, what you learned from that, and build that more intentionally into the way that you operate inside of your business? Because maybe or maybe not, up until this point, it's maybe not something you were fully aware of. So
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Cool. Well, then we'll go through this last 0.8%, and then, we can go anywhere you want to go from there. So remember, this is the core beliefs and identity underneath the action layer. So it says, I am a living work of art in progress. Change is sacred and continuous. You hold a deep belief in personal evolution, not as a chaotic process, but as something cyclical, sacred, and self-driven. Self-expression is healing. You see intentional expression through art, ritual, or action as a way to reclaim power, integrate pain, and move forward. Again, I mentioned this is fractal, right? So you're seeing some patterns that are kind of being expressed in slightly different language in the 20%, in the 4%, and the 0.8%. This is looking at it from the lens of what's the belief underneath that. And so obviously it's going to manifest in your actions in your environment. I'm the author of My Becoming. Even in the face of mental health challenges, your core identity is that of someone who chooses, designs, and shapes their way forward. And meaning makes the moment. You don't just live through the events, you imbue them with personal significance. You understand that meaning transforms an act into a milestone. So there's a quick and dirty rough draft from a 3-minute share of one story. If somebody wanted to get a more robust version of this for themselves, I have shared, I think, at least 70 separate stories to the GPT. And after every story, it does a different breakdown based on that. And you guys are the systems nerds that are listening to this. So normally I don't share this level of depth, but I think you guys like the depth. I have personally found that the context window of ChatGPT can't hold. If you shared 13 stories and then say create a comprehensive synthesis of all of this, you kind of lose some of the nuance that's important. So the way that I do it is my assistant helps me copy and paste all the answers into a spreadsheet where I have one column that's the 20%, one column that's the 4%, and one column that's the 0.8%. And then when I have ChatGPT summarize, I just paste all of the data for the 20, just paste all the data from the 0.8 and the 4, and then it creates this really robust summary of each of the layers, and that's what I found to be the quickest thing. And Laura, I think we actually created one of these for you that was like that level of depth, so maybe we're overdue for a conversation to re-examine that one that we created for you. But yeah, sure. Super grateful for this process, and it's been truly transformational to pursue. So yeah, happy to go anywhere you want from that point.
Yeah, you guess what I'm going to have on my to-do list for this evening? I'm going to have to look at mine now and like really look at it and read it a little bit. Actually, this walkthrough really helped me.
Great.
So yeah. I got a little new clarities today that I hadn't before. So that's
the thing, Laura. You were a early adopter of Curiosity Island in Group 3. So I've done 6 of these now. So every time someone goes through, my systems brain is like, how do I improve it and explain it better? And so also because I'm a systems nerd, I have my keyboard shortcuts, and I already found it and sent you the link to your doc, Laura. So awesome. You can have it pulled up.
You're awesome, Jonathan. Did you have any follow-ups for that?
I think one last one before we can keep going. When somebody goes and does this, what do you recommend they do next? What do you recommend they take all of these things, all of the 20 bullet points, the 8 and or the 4 and the 0.8? And what do they continue with?
So great question, Jonathan. And it's my answer is a slightly robust answer. So you can tell me, I'll give us a flyby, and then you can tell me if you want to slow down here. But this is the theme of this entire Find Your 4% Files series that I'm releasing on the podcast. Because what I have found is that there's this framework that lives slightly above Find Your 4 that's been super helpful for me. And that is this concept called the architect versus the player. So basically this started during COVID. My wife and I were playing lots of board games. And one night we were playing a game, and we were figuring out how to play it for the first time. And Leah was like, Brandon, it's really funny watching you pull out a game for the first time because you're always so good at reverse engineering how to win. And so it's this kind of like offhanded comment that she made to me, and I didn't really think anything of it until the next day. I actually, the day before, I was working on creating a synthesis of all my personality tests that I've ever taken, and it was just laying up on my computer. So the next day I go up and I see all this. I'm like, I had this question suddenly appear in my head. I'm like, that's really interesting. What if I looked at myself as a player inside of a game? Like, what if all these personality tests that I'm seeing about Brandon, what if I treated that as like just this player, and I was able to step outside of that version of me and architect a game for this player, where if you chose this player, this was going to be like the OP player that you're not allowed to select because like he's going to win if you get this character. And so it was that lens where I started to look at and I didn't have the language at the time, now I do, but where I would go with this is like, look at your 4% and then take a second to view this as a human, that you're like, okay, great, this is really cool. Once you step out of the player mode and into the architect mode, it's like you get to look down at the game board. So have you guys seen Jumanji, the newer ones with Kevin Rock? So one of my favorite scenes of all time is when they're in Jumanji and they're in this video game and they're trying to figure out how to operate inside of this thing. And The Rock like presses his left pec and like this scoreboard pops up and it shows strengths and weaknesses. Like they're all staring at it, and then the Kevin Hart presses it and it says his weakness is cake and all these kind of funny other kind of things. But like I think that's what this 4% does. It's like you press your left pec and boom, here's this like thing that's designed about how you work. Now your job is to step out of that player version of that's running the game and put the lens of the architect on and say, if this were my building blocks, if these were the only things I was going to engineer my entire business around, how would I go about making sure that I was able to use every single element of this and figure out the different ways that I can collaborate with people, building systems that help me to stay outside of that. And so that to me was like, it's how I ended up creating, when somebody asks me what I do and I say I own an imaginary island for a living, and then they don't know what to do with that, and then it just gets really awkward, which is like 99% of the time what happens. The only way I could have arrived at Curiosity Island is because I unapologetically looked at myself as a player. And I was like, if anything were possible, if I didn't have to think about the constraints of how a traditional business is built or anything, if I was just looking at this from the perspective of, here's this player, here are his strengths, this gives him energy when he gives it away, what would a world look like that was designed for this thing to thrive? And so I've taken the world building lens of, and that to me has been a much more interesting piece. So that's the overarching framework about how I would encourage someone to think about this, is like, get to know yourself as a player, step into the role of the architect. And then in Curiosity Island, what we've co-created with Laura being one of them, we've co-created a what I'm now calling an operating system, if we're sticking with the game metaphor of like how you move through the game as the architect. Like, how do you design the game board? I have another analogy I could use about Villainous, but I feel like I've been kind of going on for a little bit. So I'll pause for a second if you want me to go into the game board side of it, because I can talk about that. But I'll stop there.
No, I think I understand. It's kind of the aspect of, if you're not totally sure how these bullet points are supposed to work, that's what you kind of have to figure out yourself, is how do you use them to create the business or the life that you want, and like fulfills you and that you're good at, all that kind of stuff.
100%.
Brandon, oh my gosh, the light bulbs, the ahas, the golden nuggets, this is all awareness. I mean, you've taken awareness to a whole nother level with Find Your Four. And we are the systems geeks, right? Like we love hearing all the things. We love learning new things. There's, the entrepreneurial journey, I know, it can be tough. It can be challenging. We wake up every morning and we don't quit, and we keep it moving. You have created a framework to help you do that in such a powerful way. If you were going to share maybe one of your most important business building tips with our audience, what would that be today?
I don't want to sound like a broken record, because like when you talk about the frame of the it being hard, I wake up every day and I just can't wait to get back to playing my game. So it's just like, and so it's like, yes, there are hard days, and yes, there are frustrating. Actually, I find the most frustrating days when I have to step out of my 4%. Those are the heavy days where it's like, we're end of year now and my CPA is asking me for stuff. I'm like, God, it's like, give me a cheese grater so I could just use it on my forehead. I'd rather do that than do finance stuff. But I honestly, like, I think that the biggest thing is when you figure out what your 4% is and you design an environment where you get to live inside of it, like that to me has been the ultimate entrepreneurial hack as well. Because then the magic is, here's the other part about this, is once you know your 4% and you go through this process yourself, it's easier to then see it on other people. And your gift, your opportunity is to reflect back to other people. This is what I see as your 4%. And then you start to build relationships with other people that are complementary. And now at Curiosity, we're literally creating an economy where people are able to like exchange their 4% and collaborate within like a met. I was just trying to do the Pareto math on this the other day, and there's like there's not actually a mathematical interpretation of this. Lots of this is actually like different, but like think about it. If you have two people operating in their 4% together, if you were adding 64 plus 64, that's what, 128, right? Like that, like 1 hour of two people collaborating their 4%. If we were to add them, that'd be 128 hours of quote unquote effectiveness. I would imagine your 4%, with your synergizing with someone, there's some level of multiplicity involved there. So it's probably not 64 plus 64. It's probably the equivalent. So I think to answer your question, though, in the entrepreneurial journey, the more you know your 4%, the more you're in line with the energy and the more you're collaborating with other people that are operating in that way. That's what I've just found to be the true secret sauce that makes everything work.
Yeah, that is, you're making that so much more clear today for me and probably for a lot of people. All right, Jonathan, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out today.
Sure. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on and for what you do in the world. And before we leave today, we want to give yourself the chance to shout yourself out. Tell people where to find all of the finding your four, and you, where they can find you.
Yeah, 100%. So I think I mentioned this before. If you go to gobeyondcurious.com/files, that's gobeyondcurious.com/files, that is, at least right now, the best place to get access to the 4% files bonus material that will give you access to the custom GPT. It'll also give you access to the accompanying workbook that will give you questions that I've tested across hundreds of people going through this process that yield really good insights into your 4%. So not only will you get those bonus materials, but you'll also get access to this 4% files series where I am attempting at boiling the ocean of like literally going through 270 episodes of my show, finding the 4% buried within, it's like 334 plus hours of content that truly yield the highest level results. And just so, because we talked about this, the process I'm using the 4% files, and at this time of this recording, it's not even done being published because it's being released as a series. But literally the first episode is Know Your Player. The second one is Step into the Role of the Architect, where I give the framework about how to design the game board. And then all the remaining files are going to be called Power-Ups. So I'm literally going through to find the key insights that have been the biggest power-ups to either myself and as a player playing my game more effectively, or a self-awareness of the player, or as the architect. And so that I think is probably just going to be the best window into my world, because it's literally the deepening of all this. And it is my attempt at finding the 4% of this entire library of content I've spent thousands of hours making.
Awesome. We will put that in the description. Hopefully I have that link. Otherwise, I'll go and find it. But
yeah, huge gift. I've got it written down for everyone. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yep, definitely. Also, remember to grab your free System Success Guide, which will get you started systemizing your business today.
Yeah, you guys, Brandon, thank you so much for being on. That was really phenomenal. Again, we love systems. I knew that Brandon loves systems too, only because I've been hanging out with him for a minute or two. And Jonathan created a guide for you guys. You're starting out, you're creating systems, you want to grow your business. It's a foundational, and that is another big gift. So check the show notes, because this episode is heavy gifts, y'all. Yeah. All right, John.
Can I just say one final thing for anyone else listening? I would just say that like what is systems in service of? Right? Like if you ask yourself that question, really, what is systems in service of? So all the things that Laura is giving, all the things that Jonathan are giving, it's in service of you operating inside of the thing that you created your business to begin with. Why did you create your business? You probably want some form of freedom. You probably want some form of self-expression. Entrepreneurs are idiots. Like literally, why do we choose this path? It is literally the hardest path anyone could ever choose. And if you're listening to this, it means that you're one of those crazy idiots. You know, I love you. That I'm one of them too. So I'm not excluded from it. But like the whole point of a system is for you to be able to express the things that you started the business to begin with, and it's to give you that freedom that the business is allowing you to do. And so I'm excited for that bonus gift that combines both Jonathan and Laura's systems plus the Find Your 4%, because that's literally the point of us doing this ridiculous journey of entrepreneurship. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be on here, and grateful for anyone that's been hanging out with us this whole time.
Awesome. Okay, guys, that does it for this episode. Thanks for watching. And remember, for epic business growth, get systemized.
See ya.